Sophia announced she wanted a divorce on the very day she landed her promotion to senior director. The strangest thing wasn't that she was walking away. It was the complete calm on her face, as though she were finalizing a long-prepared contract. We'd been married 8 years, together for 10, and I honestly believed we were content. Or at least I felt content, which I now see might have been the real issue all along. I'm Daniel, most people call me Dan, and I teach high school history. I'm the sort of person who gets genuinely enthusiastic about unpacking the Treaty of Versailles with students who would much rather scroll on their phones. Sophia, meanwhile, built her career in corporate marketing, scaling the ranks as if her future hinged on it. When we first met, she was an intern fetching coffee, while I was wrapping up my teaching credential. We used to laugh that we'd probably stay poor forever, but at least we'd be poor side by side. That clearly didn't last. Sophia earned 3 promotions in 5 years. Almost overnight, we moved from sharing rent in a tiny flat to her discussing stock portfolios and industry mixers I barely grasped. I cheered for every step. Every late evening, every weekend sacrificed to the office instead of us. Every night she dragged herself home worn out while I'd already warmed dinner because I knew she'd be too drained to cook. I had more faith in her potential than she did back then. I'm not saying this to paint myself as some martyr. I'm saying it because it's accurate, and it makes what followed so bewildering. The latest promotion brought a huge salary jump. Suddenly she was earning at least double my pay, probably more. When she shared the news, I was truly thrilled for her. I booked a nice restaurant. We toasted. I bragged to everyone at school that my wife was absolutely killing it in the business world. For maybe 2 weeks things felt normal. Then I began noticing subtle shifts. The way she'd gently correct my vocabulary when I mixed up a corporate phrase, or how she'd glance at her phone mid-conversation without even pretending to listen. We used to share everything, silly decisions like which film to stream, or bigger questions about whether children were in our future. But gradually, her stories revolved around colleagues I'd never met, projects I couldn't follow, and an entire universe that no longer included me. I'd describe my day, the student who finally grasped the Cold War, or a ridiculous moment in the staff room, and she'd offer this courteous half-smile that never touched her eyes. The exact expression she probably reserved for dull attendees at networking events. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home, and I seemed to be the only one who registered it. The remarks began quietly, so quietly I nearly missed them. She'd say things like, "Lucky you get summers free," whenever I mentioned a break, even though she knew those months were spent revising lesson plans and picking up extra work. Or she'd exhale heavily when I proposed a quiet movie night, commenting that she needed to surround herself with driven people to keep her momentum. I'm not naive. I understood the subtext. I lacked drive, my career wasn't legitimate compared with hers, I was somehow lesser. The truth is I never craved her corporate existence. I loved teaching. I loved reasonable hours, time to read, time to simply be present instead of chasing endless output. But at some point, my satisfaction turned into idleness in her view. My reliability became inertia, and my encouragement became an anchor dragging her from some grand future she'd constructed in her mind. Her social circle shifted too. It became almost exclusively office contacts, people who tossed around terms like fiscal quarters, pivot points, and leverage. At their gatherings, I'd sit quietly, feeling as if I'd stumbled into an unsolicited seminar. Sophia stopped calling me her husband. Instead it was, "This is Dan, he's a teacher," delivered like she was describing an endearing side interest rather than my profession. One particular evening at a colleague's house crystallized everything. I stood in their kitchen clutching a beer, while Sophia held court in the next room about a campaign she'd spearheaded. A man in a tailored suit asked what I did. When I answered that I taught high school history, he actually chuckled as though I were teasing, then caught himself and muttered, "Oh, that's sweet. Somebody has to." As if educating teenagers were charity work instead of a profession. I glanced toward Sophia to see whether she'd caught it. She had, but she carried on talking without a pause, without a single word in my defense. That was the moment I understood the change was permanent. The woman I married would have corrected him instantly, would have explained why teachers matter, how demanding the work really is. This new senior director, Sophia, had already filed me under not worth the effort because I brought no networking value. I slipped out early, claiming a headache. She scarcely glanced up to say goodbye. 6 months after her promotion, she arrived home early on a Wednesday, unusual since she normally stayed until 8 or 9. She asked to talk and wore the practiced expression of someone who'd rehearsed the script, perhaps even in therapy I hadn't known about. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared countless breakfasts. She clasped her hands like she was delivering a boardroom update. "I've been reflecting on our relationship," she began. I already sensed the direction, but I let her continue. "We've drifted in different directions. Our priorities no longer align. I need a partner whose drive and ambitions match mine." She delivered it without cruelty. That's what hurt most. It sounded like a rational exit strategy, as if our marriage were a non-performing investment she had to liquidate. I asked whether someone else was involved. She seemed almost insulted, insisting no. This was purely about her focusing on her own path without the constant guilt of outpacing me. I sat quietly absorbing it and realized she was waiting for me to protest, plead, promise transformation, turn emotional and theatrical. But I'd spent 2 years fighting for us in silence, by tolerating the growing distance, by championing her goals, by shrinking so she could expand. I was drained. So instead of arguing or breaking down, I met her gaze and said simply, "If this is what you need to feel fulfilled, I won't stand in your way." Surprise flashed across her face. She'd clearly anticipated resistance. For an instant I glimpsed something, regret, perhaps, or frustration that I wouldn't supply the scene she'd scripted. Then the mask returned and she shifted to practicalities. Asset division, her attorney, a referral for mine. Right then I understood she hadn't come to negotiate a divorce. She'd come to notify me it was already done, probably decided weeks or months earlier. I was simply the final signature required. The process wrapped in 3 months. Sophia considered it draggy. I found it shockingly quick for dissolving 8 years. She was fair with the settlement, no sarcasm intended. She left me the apartment since she was relocating to a sleek high-rise downtown that cost more monthly than my annual take-home. She claimed most of the furniture to suit her updated style, and I didn't contest any of it. I just wanted peace. When she arrived for the last boxes, she paused in the doorway, scanning the nearly bare rooms as though trying to recall why she'd ever called the place home. Then she walked out without a farewell. I stood alone in the echoing space, waiting for devastation to hit. It never arrived. Instead, I experienced an unexpected ease, as though I'd been holding my breath for 2 solid years and someone finally said I could breathe. The initial week felt disorienting. I'd wake and instinctively reach for my phone to share some small school moment, then remember she no longer cared. But I made coffee in a tranquil kitchen. No hurry, no unspoken tension, no quiet judgment about my choice of cup or pace. The apartment actually felt more spacious without her presence. Colleagues checked in constantly, offering drinks, blind dates, distractions. I was grateful, yet I didn't crave any of it. What I needed was space to rediscover myself outside Sophia's yardstick of achievement. I began morning runs, not for vanity or display, but to channel the pent-up restlessness I'd buried so long. At first I struggled to finish a single block, but each step quieted my thoughts for a while, and that felt like progress. I won't pretend the early weeks were painless. Some nights I lay awake wondering whether I should have battled harder, whether I truly was the issue. But then I'd recall the exhaustion of those final 2 years, the careful word choice, the constant sense of falling short, the way I'd begun editing myself because my world had grown too modest for her. I'd remember shrinking, apologizing for taking up room, watching her regard me as something she'd outgrown. Staying would have meant signing up for permanent inadequacy. Sophia had framed my teaching role as charming but trivial, my satisfaction as complacency, my loyalty as lack of initiative. The painful part, I'd started accepting her verdict. I'd begun wondering if I really was limiting her. 2 months after the papers were signed, I joined a weekend hiking group a colleague had recommended. I just wanted to escape the apartment instead of ruminating. It turned out perfect. No one asked about titles or bonuses. We simply walked trails and chatted about ordinary things, novels, songs, the best snacks for long treks. Sleep improved. Meals tasted better. Genuine laughter returned without an inner critic demanding productivity. One Saturday, while sorting a drawer, I found an old snapshot from our 3rd anniversary. Both of us cracking up at a restaurant we could hardly afford back then. I stared a long time, trying to pinpoint when the laughter faded. In that photo, Sophia looked at me like I was her entire world. I remembered feeling like the most fortunate man alive, because this dynamic, brilliant woman picked me. I placed the picture in a storage box with the other mementos, not to erase her, but because clinging to that past version only prolonged the ache. A colleague remarked I seemed different, freer. I admitted I was slowly getting there, and for once the words felt honest. I shared a few casual photos online, me on a ridge, coffee with the hiking crew. Not performative, just moments worth remembering. For the first time in years, my life felt documentable. That's when mutual acquaintances mentioned Sophia inquiring about me, subtly at first, then more directly. A former colleague said she'd asked at an event whether anyone had recent news of me, how I was holding up. Another mentioned she'd viewed my posts, unusual since she'd rarely engaged with them during our marriage. I tried not to dwell on it. Yet a small part of me wondered whether she regretted the choice, whether she'd anticipated my collapse and was puzzled by my steadiness. The old version of me would have texted, opened the door for reconciliation. But I had no desire to return to apologizing for my own existence, to a relationship where I constantly fell short of someone's newly elevated standards. Roughly a month after the decree, I bumped into Sophia outside a downtown cafe. I was with hiking friends, sweaty from a trail, probably disheveled. She was polished, tailored outfit, flawless styling, that purposeful walk that once filled me with pride and now mostly evoked fatigue. She paused when our eyes met. For a beat neither spoke. "Dan," she said, her tone gentler, less assured. "You look well, you've been exercising." I nodded. "Yeah, running and hiking keeps me occupied." She offered no reply, simply waited for absolution I wouldn't grant. Custody remained unchanged. Over following months, Marissa improved consistency, regular visits, genuine interest in the children's world. Yet she continued viewing me as her story's antagonist. I introduced Rebecca to the kids 8 months into dating. They warmed to her naturally. She never forced a maternal role, simply respected them as individuals, allowing bonds to form organically. Rebecca, a civil engineer, embodied steadiness and tranquility, qualities Marissa lacked, and fully accepted the children's primacy and slow healing pace. When Marissa discovered it, she sent lengthy accusations of replacement, teaching disposability, modeling poor patterns. I ignored it, arguing projection seemed futile. The children adapted gradually, steady routines with me, scheduled time with Marissa, forward momentum fueled by stability. Our daughter resumed soccer, abandoned during earlier anxiety. Watching her score while Rebecca and I cheered felt like quiet triumph. Our son opened emotionally, processing with therapy. One day he shared understanding mommy's choices concerned her alone, not him, not us. I felt pride he'd reached that insight at 13, despite sorrow he needed to. Marissa maintained her online narrative, posts about co-parenting struggles with a challenging former spouse, societal penalties for authenticity, court gender bias. Remaining circle friends commented supportively, unaware of full context. She omitted missed visits, custody reasons, or choosing a near stranger over children. Always victimhood, never accountability. I once encountered a circle member at the store. She glared judgmentally, as though I'd crushed a woman's essence. I considered explaining reality but chose silence. People cling to preferred versions, and I was weary of justification. Rebecca and I became engaged 2 years into dating, simple, private moment at home. Telling the children brought cautious joy. They'd learned good things could vanish. Marissa learned via the kids and phoned furious. How could I advance so swiftly, introduce another woman, erase her significance? I answered calmly, I'm not erasing you, Marissa. You erased yourself when motherhood became insufficient. She labeled me heartless, claiming minimal love if moving on came easily. I replied, I loved you across 13 years through every phase you presented, but I won't love the version that forsakes our children. That's my limit. That marked our final meaningful exchange. Afterward, only logistics, schedules, child updates, courteous yet remote, like acquaintances managing joint duties. The children thrive now, therapy, structure, a devoted father, a compassionate stepmother, a mother attempting within limits during weekends. Marissa occasionally shares online about her path, costs of genuineness, lessons, but never fully owns her actions, merely allusions to personal sacrifice for truth. She raises her son alone, works full-time, navigates single motherhood she once assumed would prove simple. I sometimes ponder whether she connects the irony, fleeing one set of duties only to face similar ones without former support or understanding. I don't view her as evil. I see someone persuaded freedom meant one thing, only to discover its cost after irreversible destruction. Comprehending mistakes doesn't obligate enduring their fallout. I'd already done so for 13 years. My takeaway after 2 years of reflection: genuine love isn't dramatic displays, self-prioritization, or constant searching for something missing. It's reliability on ordinary days, washing dishes, assisting schoolwork, comforting after bad dreams. It's collaborative building rather than perpetual longing. Marissa believed walking away demonstrated courage, liberation from constraint. In truth, she exchanged one responsibility set for another while sacrificing those who truly counted. The paradox: she landed in comparable circumstances, a working mother facing daily parenting realities, minus destroyed support and plus added scrutiny. She called it revolutionary self-choice. Perhaps in her view, but I chose our children. I chose steady presence, unglamorous effort, being the dependable parent. Seeing my daughter laugh freely at dinner, my son complete assignments without dread, the life reconstructed from ruins, she left confirms which decision held true value. Sometimes the boldest act isn't fleeing duty, it's remaining faithful to it, being the person your children trust when everything else crumbles. That's the understanding I hope my children carry forward, not condemnation of their mother, but recognition that authentic strength lies in commitment, not escape when challenges arise. What are your thoughts on this experience? Share below.